Today, I'll be talking about immigration and refugee resettlement and why you should support it. As a result of my speech, the audience will be aware of the impacts on refugees, be given information on how they can offer support, they'll be persuaded to support this process, and will also be convinced to always welcome anyone trying to seek new opportunities and a better life. Refugees are faced with overwhelming difficulties. A lot of these include hunger, devastation from war, violence, lack of basic healthcare, and lack of basic sanitation. So, why are these refugees moving places? Well, most of them are seeking asylum and searching for safety for their family. These people feel unsafe because of all of the human rights violations. They have no access to basic needs such as soap or water that we have, and severe entrapment that their children face. The severe entrapment includes being recruited into labor intensive jobs and being trafficked into other locations. This can also include sex trafficking sometimes. So, what needs to be done? Well, most diplomatic and humanitarian of countries must step in to assist. Rehoming these refugees would help a lot, and offering dignity and humanity to refugees seeking a better life. Why is this important? Well, it could offer a better response to ending the pandemic, specifically the one that we currently face, and it would help to prevent future diseases on the horizon as well. It ultimately enables nations to work together to provide a better quality of life overall. Refugees who are searching for a place to resettle are simply seeking safety for their family. Refugees are escaping from the war, violence, and economic collapse in their own home countries. What should these nations do, and how could it benefit society? Well, most of these nations and countries must step in and assist the families. Helping them to stay together and receiving human treatment would help the most. These countries also need to protect the vulnerable as separation continues. They must also assist refugees who are fleeing their home countries from oppression. A quote that I wanted to share is by Tracking Joe Biden's Plans for Refugees, Asylum Seekers, and COVID-19. And this quote says, "Urgent action is needed to unwind inhumane policies like Remain in Mexico, to search humanitarian assistance to the Northern Triangle, and to reform the U.S. asylum process by prioritizing both competence and humanity." This chart I found really important because it seems in the last few years, refugee admissions have been falling really low. And I wanted to share another quote from the same article, which says the IRC welcomes the president elect's ambitious commitment to welcome 125,000 refugees per year, after a record low bar of 15,000 this year set by Trump administration. So it proves that our new president that will be elected soon plans to admit all of these refugees, so many more. Refugees will find new homes, jobs, and feel more protection if they find new homes. This adds to the diversity and culture of a community, specifically the country, and it provides safety to all family members, and the refugee encourages strong moral values. It is part of the American tradition to welcome everybody into this country. This quote I wanted to share, which proves that, is America's tradition as a land that welcomes peoples from other countries. There's some more quotes at the bottom that I want to share, and I'll share one of them. Immigrants and refugees have shown their friendship. Now it's time for us to show friendship right back by supporting workforce development opportunities. So we should be helping these refugees in return. As a form of oppression, women and children are being forced into labor-intensive roles, abducted and forced into jobs, and they end up in sex trafficking mostly. These human rights violations exist all over the world. This mainly includes parents that feel the need to give up their children, and this becomes really bad for the child because they end up in trafficking or forced marriages. A quote that I wanted to share are one at the bottom by Child Trafficking and Mali Increasing because of conflict and COVID-19. Children are being forced to fight by armed groups, trafficked, raped, sold, and forced into sexual domestic servitude or married off. Administrations must put an end to child recruitment. More protections need to be put in place in order to prevent this. And one of the quotes I wanted to share is the top one right here. How can you help end violence and against women and girls? Reports of violence against women and girls during the COVID-19 pandemic have increased around the world. And this isn't good because we need to really help that, and administrations need to come in and step in. Helping the most vulnerable of populations in response to COVID-19 pandemic specifically greatly impacts the ability of world leaders to end the pandemic. Refugees in camps specifically lack proper social distancing measures, and they don't have access to basic hygiene needs. These poverty-stricken refugee communities need vaccine help especially. Free access to much-needed vaccines will help to end the pandemic overall. The government leaders need to work together to provide supplies such as soap and water especially, and displaced refugees do not have the choice like we do in order to, get the basic healthcare needs that they need. The US must provide assistance so that the pandemic will not continue. As you can see, it's not the reality for millions of refugees. According to the article, Space, Shelter, and Scarce Resources, Coping with COVID-19, having access to basic services such as healthcare, sanitation, and decent shelter to call home are essential for all human beings to live with dignity. And that's just a quote that I really found important that I think needs to be shared because everybody needs basic healthcare in order to just live with protection. Rehoming refugees gives access to healthcare and helps end the pandemic, specifically COVID-19, which we still currently face. Vaccinating refugees would help stop the spread of the virus. Access to healthcare benefits the community and society. Providing assistance to displaced refugees would encourage them to grow a better life. Refugees seeking protection and safety also seek it disease and famine because they're trying to get away from war and violence, but they're also trying to seek protection from disease and famine. Countries must work together to provide safe havens, healthcare, and hygiene for refugees. The quote that I wanted to share at the top is, "No solution will return us to normalcy unless the response prioritizes the world's most vulnerable." So, today I've shared with you all why resettlement is important and beneficial to every person. You are now aware of the impacts of resettlement on refugees and how to offer support. So, with this information, it's important for you to spread the many reasons why people should support this process. Encourage them to do so. Don't ignore it. Always be welcoming to anyone who's trying to seek new opportunities and a better life. By supporting immigration and refugee resettlement, you can convince others to think more on the subject and spread love and support to everyone overall. These are all my references. I used 8 or 7. Thank you for letting me share.